So if you hadn't guessed already, we're going to talk about prayer today. So I ask you, are you prayed up? And when I was thinking about prayer this week, and for a lot of times for me, song is prayer. And the song you just sang is like a perfect lead into, like to listen to that before you go into that time of stillness. Yeah, like I almost went there. You almost didn't get me up here because I was so in it. But there was other songs this week that came to my forefront that I like. And one of them came twice. It was interesting. There's an old hymn called I Need Thee Every Hour. And David Patterson brought my awareness back to it, just in some communication with he and I back and forth. And then Sabrina yesterday mentioned that song. And I was like, yes, because it brought me back to that I need that communion time with God, with the divine. And in the lyric, when it talks about the Savior, metaphysically, when we look at that, it is the guide that moves you from error thought. And then the other one that came to mind was Sweet Hour of Prayer. Late 1800s it was written. And I remember for the first time hearing it, I was probably in my teenage years, and I was like, sweet hour of prayer? An hour? A whole hour? And yes, we can pray for a whole hour, and we can pray for a millisecond. But those songs that come to mind when you need them, that you're like, oh yeah, there was this song, it can be a tool to bring you to that prayer space. One of our principles, so principle number 4, is through prayer and meditation, we align our heart-mind with God. So remember our thoughts that we talked about last week, there was a heart-mind connection. So in prayer, we allow that heart-mind connection to connect with the divine. And then when I look at Scripture, one of my favorites is rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. And from some back history for me, I want to share, there is no right or wrong way to pray. Isn't. I remember taking I can't remember what class it was. It was in the Unity. I was in a different denomination at the time, but it was about prayer, and it was giving different styles of prayer, different ways to pray. And I was probably in my early 20s when I was taking that class, and I am a people pleaser by nature. And I sobbed in my bed that night because from what I heard in the class, I was praying all wrong. That's what I heard. And so I am in bed, curled up, fetal position, doing the ugly cry, because I disappointed God. I thought I did. I didn't. But in that moment of prayer, of God, I'm sorry, there was this cool breeze that went through my room. There's no fan. It was just this cool, and immediately when it passed, I stopped crying. Immediately I knew I'm okay. There's no right or wrong way to pray. So when I move through this today, I will share some styles. It is not the only and the right way. So please be open to that. Affirmative prayer, which we talk about in Unity, is the style of prayer that leans us into that knowing God is the prayer source. It is the source of when we come to with questions, the needs, the need for direction, that we get that source. It's that divine mind connection, that communion, that time with God that opens us. It opens the door that we're knocking on. And I go through it like it's not a beseeching thing, but then I looked at it as you kind of have to ask for what you want. So you have to kind of beseech in a way, but it's not like a begging, like oh God, if I get this new car, I'll stop cussing. The likelihood of that for me is not high. I love Jesus, but I say some bad words sometimes. And it's not a wish list. But when I look at this, I'm looking at not only do you come with the request, and you don't come with the expectation that God is going to wave the magic wand and go, boom, boom, there you go. But it does cause us in our request to come with the expectation that we expect God to move and inspire us and others to receive God's guidance and act on it. We don't come up with the expression of the magic wand to fix things. We come up with the expression to bring our awareness, awaken us to what is ours to do. And when we awaken that in us, then others feel it too, because there's that, I talk about that energy that it has no space, no time. And so for me, it is, pushing the wrong button here. For me, prayer is a sacred time of empowerment. It's a time to go to your charging station and power up. Charles Fillmore called it going to headquarters. He'd go, I'm going to go to headquarters, and everybody knew that he meant he was going to go pray for a minute. For me, it is my recharge time. And have you ever heard about, you've spent your time in prayer, and then you get the answer no or not yet. And then you're heartbroken because you have this result of no or not yet. And then time passes and you fast forward and you realize that everything was answered. And it was answered for our highest good. Myrtle Fillmore shares, keep on praying for faith. It is through prayer that you develop all of your wonderful qualities of the soul. It is where we power up. It's where we recharge. And Jesus spent a lot of time in prayer. Many times before we hear a story of Jesus did whatever it was he did, he was in prayer before it happened. And I think it is that moment when Jesus comes forward and the full human self that Jesus was, connecting to the divine self, going, show me, empower me, lead me. And when I talked about we get the no, we get the not yet, and then we hear the highest and best, and that is a common phrase, highest and best. And highest and best being used in unity, it's often that we want the highest and best for all involved, and sometimes it's not what we want. I can think of times of healing where we're requesting healing. And I apologize, Sam, I didn't warn you before this, but I'm going to talk about Princess for a minute. When my dog, Princess, was starting to not feel well, and she's older, and so her body started to shut down, and I was praying I wanted the medicine to work, and I wanted her to be healed. And it wasn't what was supposed to be for me then. And I spent a lot of time afterwards a lot of times I went through the guilt process. Did I make the right decision? Did I do what was best? Did I use my human power to think I knew what she wanted? And we kind of do that sometimes where we want what we want, and we assume that the other person may want the same thing. And this little being couldn't talk back to me right then. And so then I went through my time of, I need to hear back that I made the right decision. And I do hear back. And the weirdest things happen. Like, Princess didn't come to me in a dream, but a dog that I had well over 20 years ago came to me in a dream. Her name was Lady. And it was just to let me know that everything was okay. She was a chocolate lab. No, she wasn't a chocolate lab. She was a black lab. And but she wasn't, in the dream, she was like a 5-year-old lab and not the older lab that we had to say goodbye to. And so it was that reassurance of my time in prayer was anchored. And so sometimes the highest and best all the way around doesn't always hit our heart space how we would prefer it to. Often the answers, that we are seeking is provided in prayer. Like at a minimum, it's a catalyst that moves us to what is ours that's next to do. It's that time when you get the aha moment of, oh, I didn't think about that. Or when you get, for me, it's when I get inspiration for a talk, that I get the catalyst moment. And it prompts, I'm going to use a lot of P's, I like reiteration. It prompts, it prods, it positions us in alignment, and it provides purpose. Prayer is not just about us individually either, kind of moving back to Princess, but it's also that when we set our intention for our desired outcomes don't only affect our world. Our desired outcomes affect, because of our oneness, more things. And this is where the heart and mind communication is important, that there's this synergy between heart and mind while we're in that communion with God to know, and even to come back to, if you feel uncertain. You're like, I need to sit a little bit more. And then for me, it's okay for God for me to ask God, I need you to make it obvious, because I'm not getting it. Make it like a billboard. And so I wanted to touch kind of on some of the prayer process and kind of some things with unity, because we talk about the silence a lot. And it may be an assumption because when we go into the silence, everything stops and it's quiet. But the silence doesn't have anything to do with auditory sound. Not a thing. The silence has to do with quieting the mind, quieting the busyness of our head. Mine gets rather noisy, a lot. And so sometimes auditory silence is not going to bring me to silence my mind. Sometimes music brings me to silence my mind. Sometimes a steady tone brings me to silence my mind. So there are, one of my teachers called the silence, she called it falling still. Let's just fall still for a moment. I was like, oh, I like that. Because I'm a visual person, so then I can imagine it. I can imagine where I am when I fall still. And if I'm going to fall still, I'm going to rewind to me sitting on the deck at my grandma and grandpa's house with my feet in the water, and my mind is still. So I want to touch on Unity's 5-step prayer process. And so the first step is that we relax. So you bring not to come rigid to your time in prayer, but to totally melt into it so that you can be receptive. I watched this TV show where one of the actors, we just watched it last night, Sam. What was it? Anyways, it's a squad, a SWAT team. It's SWAT. It's called SWAT. And good Lord, I'm like, I told you there's a lot of things going on up in here, and another thought came in. So one of the things he said a lot is when he brings his team in to go take care of whatever the situation is, he will tell them, be fluid. And I think about that when I fall still, when I go into that time to relax, that I bring myself almost into water form, where you take the form and the substance and the malleability of being with the divine, whatever that looks like for you. Because for you, it may not be water. It may be something different. So you relax, and then you concentrate. And it's not concentrating on the thing that you want or the thing that you need. It's concentrating on God as the source that will provide you the guidance, the energy, the endurance, the strength, the wisdom, the power to move this into your world and your being. And then we meditate. Your meditation could be as long as your body needs it to be. If you need a sweet hour of prayer, take a sweet hour of prayer. If you can recenter quickly, for me, sometimes it's a busy day, and it's like, okay, I just need a minute. So I'll find a quiet place for just a minute to just be, to just set it aside. And so when we meditate here regularly, right before the talk. And I do keep it short, because not everybody is a hour of prayer. And it allows us to get what we need, and it starts that, remember I told you that it will be a catalyst, and so you may have something in that moment where we're praying for a little bit of time, that later when you go into your deeper, longer time of prayer, your energy in your body doesn't forget that. It moves to you and stays, it's a continuous flow. And then you realize, and when you realize, I say that's when you get your aha moments, your divine downloads, your ideas. That's where we affirm the truth. And then we give thanks. We give thanks. For me, it's thanks that I'm able to still myself long enough, quiet myself long enough that I can actually listen to what I need to hear and what I need to know. And it's also thanks for the awakening of that energy to be felt by other people, to be felt in this world of where things can sometimes look bleak, or we don't like it, or it's rubbing up against us the wrong way. But it can allow us to, in our time of prayer, be able to recognize where we see wonderful things happening and the goodness for us and the goodness for everyone. And so I see people taking pictures of slides. Anybody else still need a picture of slide? Because I'm getting ready to, okay. The 5 steps are in your bulletin insert too, by the way. And so I've found some hints they work for me. So if they work for you, great. If it doesn't, then leave it, because it's just surrender in prayer. And so that means that I let all of the Leslie me, which can be that self-talk sometimes, that's you have your part that goes, oh, you got this. And you got the other part that goes, you haven't learned to do this, you haven't met this step, you're not doing this, and blah, 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 blah. So I surrender all of that busy mind stuff aside. And then I am still in the silence where I fall still. And then from that time for me, I act on what my divine downloads were. And then this is probably the most important closing step. I surrender again. And it's hard for us control freaks that need to go, oh, but I've got to organize this, I've got to do this. And sometimes I have spent time to where I'm like, oh, I'm organizing. And then later, I realize everything I spent my busy time doing, organizing all the things, there was a simpler process of 20 steps, 5 steps. If I would have just surrendered and been still a little longer. So I do have your insert for your spiritual exploration for the week. And so experiment a little bit with the 5-step prayer process. I included a link that you'll have to type out because can't click on 3D paper. But it's like normal words, not like 5-2, ampersand, heart, whatever. And then experiment with your environment to see where is that silence for you. Is it pure silence? Is it, I need a little bit of music? Is it, I need just a tone? Look to see where that makes you when you come to pray in those different experiences. So try all of them. Do you feel happy, nervous, scared, curious? Like what's your feeling when you're in those prayer moments? And determine what tools or surroundings you need for that time to be where you sit yourself in that silence, that stillness of the mind. Each state may require a different environment. Like for me, if I'm busy and I have a whole lot that I need to concentrate on, I need silence. If it's just a little bit and I just need the hug of a melody, then I'll listen to a song. And so determine what your need is and what fits best with that environment, because sometimes we need silence, sometimes we need song, and there's no wrong way. Oh, it's there, okay. I couldn't remember if I put that up there. So with this, we are going to say our affirmation. And this is our affirmation for the year, transform. We say it 3 times. We usually get a little bit more excited by the 3rd time. And then we say it 3 times because it resonates the words in with our body. In God's infinite abundance, I co-create and transform. In God's infinite abundance, I co-create and transform. God's infinite abundance, I co-create and transform.